It was supposed to be a simple weekend getaway. My girlfriend Megan and I had rented a remote cabin in the woods to escape the chaos of work and city life. Winter had come early that year, blanketing everything in a thick layer of snow. The cabin, advertised as cozy and isolated, seemed perfect for some quiet time. The first night was magical. The snow glittered under the moonlight, and the cabin's wood-burning stove filled the air with a comforting warmth. We cooked dinner, played cards, and laughed about how nice it was to be disconnected from the world. No Wi-Fi, no cell service, just us and the wilderness. By the second day, the storm had rolled in. It wasn't in the forecast, but that wasn't unusual for the region. The wind howled, rattling the windows, and the snow piled up quickly, swallowing the porch steps and half the front door. We joked about being snowed in, not yet realizing how true that would become. By evening, the mood had shifted. The power went out first, plunging the cabin into darkness. We lit candles and stoked the fire, but the storm's intensity made it impossible to feel comfortable. The wind sounded almost alive, shrieking and moaning as it whipped around the cabin. Around midnight, the first strange noise came, a loud thump against the side of the cabin, like something heavy had been thrown against it. Megan and I exchanged uneasy glances. Probably just snow sliding off the roof, I said, trying to sound confident. But in my gut, I knew it didn't sound right. The thumping continued sporadically throughout the night, always in different spots. Once, it sounded like it came from the roof. Another time, it was just outside the window by the kitchen. Each time, we'd jump and look at each other, too scared to speak. By morning, the storm had eased, but the damage was done. The snow had drifted so high that the doors wouldn't budge. We were trapped. We tried to stay calm, telling ourselves the storm would be over soon and someone would come looking for us if we didn't check out on time. But as the day dragged on, the tension grew. Megan kept glancing at the windows, as if expecting to see something or someone out there. I tried to keep busy, chopping wood and clearing snow from the windows, but unease gnawed at me. That night, the noises returned. This time, it wasn't just thumping. There were scratching sounds too, like fingernails raking against the wooden walls. Megan wanted to barricade the windows, but with what? The furniture was too heavy, and we couldn't risk breaking the glass. "What do you think it is?" she whispered, clutching a blanket tightly around her shoulders. "Probably animals," I said, though I didn't believe it. "Raccoons or something looking for food." In the middle of a storm, I didn't have an answer. Around midnight, the scratching stopped, replaced by a new sound: footsteps. Slow, deliberate crunches in the snow, circling the cabin. Megan grabbed my arm, her nails digging into my skin. "It's just the wind," I whispered, though the words felt hollow. We listened, frozen in place. The footsteps moved closer, stopping just outside the front door. There was a long pause, and then the knob rattled. Megan let out a small gasp, and I grabbed the fire poker, holding it tightly as I crept toward the door. "Who's there?" I shouted. My voice cracked, betraying my fear. No answer, just silence. Then the footsteps started again, retreating into the snow. I stayed by the door for what felt like hours, waiting for them to return, but they didn't. The next morning, I found the tracks. They weren't animal tracks, like I'd been hoping. They were human, leading from the woods to the cabin and back again. I followed them a short distance until they disappeared into the tree line. There were no other signs of life. By now, the storm's aftermath had turned the cabin into a prison. The snow around the door had hardened into an icy wall, and even the windows were impossible to open. We were running low on firewood, and the cold was creeping in. Megan grew quieter as the day wore on. She sat by the fire, staring into the flames, while I paced the cabin, trying to think of a way out. Every solution seemed impossible. The isolation, once charming, now felt suffocating. That night, we barely slept. The noises came again, louder this time. Thumping, scratching, and those deliberate footsteps circling the cabin, over and over. Then came the knocking, slow, measured taps on the front door. We didn't answer. We just sat there, huddled together, staring at the door as the knocking continued. After what felt like an eternity, it stopped. But the silence that followed was even worse. Every creak of the cabin, every gust of wind, felt like a prelude to something terrible. Around dawn, I heard Megan whisper my name. I turned to see her staring at the window, her face pale. "There's someone out there," she said, her voice barely audible. I followed her gaze, but all I saw was snow and shadows. "I don't see anything," I said, though my heart was racing. "It was there," she insisted, "watching us, The day passed in a blur of fear and exhaustion. By evening, the snow had started falling again, erasing the footprints outside. The fire was dying, and we had no more wood to keep it going. The cold was unbearable, and Megan was growing weaker, her hands trembling as she tried to sip some water. "We have to leave," she said. "We can't stay here." She was right, but there was nowhere to go. The snow was too deep, the cold too severe. Leaving the cabin felt like, well, terrifying. But staying felt worse. That night the knocking returned, louder, more insistent. This time, it wasn't just the front door. It was the windows, the walls, even the roof. It sounded like we were surrounded. Megan started crying, and I held her, unsure of what else to do. The knocking stopped abruptly, and the silence that followed was suffocating. Then, the door creaked open. I hadn't unlocked it. I hadn't even touched it. But it swung open slowly, revealing nothing but darkness beyond. The cold rushed in, extinguishing the last embers of the fire. The door swung open slowly, and Megan and I exchanged a terrified glance before stepping cautiously toward the threshold. Outside, the storm had calmed to a faint whisper of wind. We decided we couldn't stay any longer. Together, we packed what little we had and wrapped ourselves in every layer we could manage. The snow was knee-deep, and every step felt like a battle. But we pushed on, following the faint outline of the forest path we thought led downhill. The cold seeped into our bones, and Megan stumbled once, then twice. I grabbed her arm, helping her up each time, urging her to keep going. "We're close," I lied, hoping it would keep her moving. Just when the last of our strength was fading, we saw lights ahead, a small ranger station nestled at the base of the hill. Relief flooded me as we shouted and waved, our voices carrying over the quiet, frozen landscape. The rangers hurried out to meet us, guiding us inside where warmth and safety waited. We explained that the storm had trapped us, and the rangers nodded sympathetically. "You're lucky you made it out. These woods can be dangerous in weather like this." Megan and I looked at each other, but we didn't mention the noises or the footprints. What was the point? The only thing that mattered was that we were safe. We never returned to that cabin. Even now, Megan will sometimes bring it up in passing, wondering aloud what might have been out there that night. I always shake my head and change the subject. Some questions are better left unanswered.